of the treason, America is still in the Constitution, Article 2, but for the most part, they've gotten rid of the treason law. In this country, they've gotten rid of the treason law, and what you have instead is extrajudicial killings. You have them doing things outside of all them kind of nonsense things. So why don't you just tell us, as not only just the Muslim community or everyone else, just say, look, if you do this, you might die. We might actually put you in a room and shoot you to death.
Sure. And I'm not justifying
and I'm saying to you,
think that's good.
No, I think they should. Do you know why I say? Do you know why I say they should say that to us in a direct way? I say
That's
that.
not happening here, though.
Yeah, it's not happening. It's in America. They say if you do these things, we'll kill you.
He wasn't executed, was he? There's lots and lots of
No, I'm not saying that. Look, these are just certain things.
No, he's not saying what I'm saying. He's saying what's going on.
I'm saying that. Look,
Sorry, go on.
look. Studies have shown that there have been thousands of extrajudicial killings. Let me explain what it shows. In America, they bring some guy like Abdurrahman al-Awlaqi, who's the son of, he's a kid,
I'm
and they shoot him, all right, with a drone or something. Okay, that's unjustifiable. It's a kid. He's got nothing to do with anything. But let's say, for example, there's other cases like it. They bring some guy and they kill him. Why? Because they say you're doing things that are going to lead to a jeopardizing of our security. There's a breach of social contract here. There's you're breaching the allegiance. But because they want to maintain the false fake narrative that, look, we allow freedom of speech and expression, they'll make it as if these things are just happening on the side. But if they were open and honest about it and say, look, if they said, look, we will kill you if you do this, what that does is those guys that are killed extrajudicially, that makes sense. Those guys that are being killed extrajudicially, right, which are thousands of people being killed those guys that are being killed extrajudicially, at least they'll be given a trial. At least, okay, there's two things they'll be given, a warning and a trial.
Sure, but you're defending freedom of speech right there.
No, that's not freedom of speech. That's a different thing altogether.
No, but look.
These are called habeas corpus rights.
Sure, but
right.
look.
So what I'm saying is that the Americans decide to take away habeas corpus rights at certain times. What I'm saying is, instead of doing that, why don't you just be honest with us and say, look, if you do these things, we're going to kill you.
They argue that they do it outside of America where the law doesn't apply. That's why
I mean, that's a bullshit excuse.
No, I'm not justifying.
They still do it.
And it's not just, and like even in your example,
that doesn't infringe the American law.
Their ideas is
you're giving an example of freedom of speech or freedom of expression or freedom of access to information is not being adequately followed. Just because they don't follow it doesn't mean the principle is not right.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that the concept of freedom of speech, freedom of expression, freedom of religion doesn't exist in the real world in an absolute sense.
Look, freedom in an absolute sense doesn't exist at all. But that doesn't mean that freedom as a concept in degrees doesn't exist. It's like temperature.
All right, fine.
Temperature as an absolute doesn't exist. However, you can say 30 degrees, 40 degrees, 50 degrees.
Most societies have shown that we need some kind of law that if these people are traitors of our law, or if these people do these things, espionage or sedition or treason, we can't tolerate that to the extent where we'll kill them. Whether they do that judicially or extrajudicially, what I'm saying is, why don't you just be so open and honest about that, and give people a try? Right, be open. These are our limitations as a state. If someone does X, we will punish them with Y. Don't pretend that you're allowed to say whatever you want to say, but then take some guy out of his house at 3 o'clock in the morning and kill them with no trial.
No country allows absolute freedom of speech. Absolute freedom of speech as a defense point is a myth.
Yes.
Absolute freedom of speech doesn't exist. Absolute freedom of speech is allowed until this speech infringes, has the potential to cause physical harm. So, calls to violence, releasing sensitive information on a case.
Yes.
Releasing sensitive information on a case that will, obstruct investigations, like leaking personal information that can lead to personal attacks. So, yes, you're allowed to speak your mind.
No, but it's not only just that. No, it's not just that. Sorry, just to cut you off. In America, there are, I'm not sure if you've ever seen this, there's something called the US flag code. Have you seen it?
Yes.
Desecrating the American flag is a crime in most states. And this
I don't agree with that.
Oh, look, you don't need to agree or disagree. That's a debate in America. And by the way, if I turn a flag upside down, look, you got a big American flag, yeah?
Yeah, and turn it upside down.
If I turn it upside down in America, I mean, we're not talking about the medieval period here going so far away. If you turn a flag around or desecrate the flag or put it under your foot or something, you'll see on YouTube how people fight over that kind of thing.
And I disagree
Look, and
with that.
moreover, you'll see that the Supreme Court of Justice, they repealed the court. It's called, I think it's Thompson versus Texas or something. Johnson versus Texas, 1988. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, this guy, he went out, he put the flag under his foot. He was ripping up the flag and whatever. Johnson. In Texas, there was a flag desecration law. If you did that, you go to prison. They put him in prison.
Sure.
Okay, wait. What I'm saying is, look, constitutionally and from a liberal perspective, did they have a right to do that? I say they did have a right to do that because they made it clear to him: if you do this to our flag, we will put you in prison. That's a law in the country. It's against freedom of expression and speech,
yes,
but it's not against the social contract, and it's not against following law.
It is against the social contract.
No, it's not against.
Let me explain.
It's not against the social contract.
Look, I still disagree with that. I still think that the argument that saying these guys are doing something bad, we should do it too. I think that's the worst possible argument you can make in defense of something.
It's not bad. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying it's look. I'm saying this is what I'm saying.
And I am saying
no, that's a straw man.
wrong.
Before you make that, I'm saying that they had a right to make that law. If the American people, through democracy or otherwise, decide that they don't want to see their flag being trampled upon, then that is something from a social contract and from a democratic perspective that should be honored. There's nothing wrong with that.
Sure, but look, if we all vote, we should kill a person.
Pardon?
Like if we all vote to kill an innocent person.
No, not an innocent person.
No, listen. If we all vote, because if this is democratic principle, if we all vote to kill an innocent person, should we go ahead with it?
Now here's the thing. That's you're outlining a contradiction between democracy and liberalism.
Yes, and that's also applying here.
Because no, the thing is,
because you're saying, look,
let me explain. Let me answer that.
You should apply that because people have voted for it, and I'm saying no. There are certain things that we should keep off bounds, regardless.
Right. So innocence, how would you define that? Because here's the thing. If that person has gone against one of the rules of the sovereign, it wouldn't be called killing. It would be called execution, right?
It's a potato.
No, it's not potato, my friend. Let me explain why.
If a man is a dead,
sorry,
he's a dead man.
When you go to war, if you go to war against an aggressive side, okay, when the British went to war against the Germans, no one referred to what is happening to the Germans, or as murder. They said that everyone has seen that as justified. What Hitler did. If you killed Hitler and if you came with a gun and you shot him in his... Yeah. So the point is...
That's still murder. It's just justified murder.
You can call him
murder.
No problem. But it's not an innocent person anymore, is it? So it's justified.
Look, you can murder someone.
Yeah.
And if you murder, like not manslaughter, just murder.
Yeah.
And you have a good reason to murder this person. Like, I don't know, you attacked me or you threatened someone else and I murdered him. That is murder. I'm, by definition, guilty of murder. Whether there's a justification for this murder is...
Here's what I'm saying. Look, me, I'm not a liberal, as you know.
Fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not a liberal. But what I'm saying is this. Here's my argument in the first place. My argument is, your argument as a libertarian, which left-leaning...
No, I'm not.
Well, you're believing in that direction, or someone who's kind of believes in that the state should have less rights to murder people, for example, yeah? That's your argument.
I believe in... No, okay, maybe just to clarify.
What's your position?
I do believe that the state has the right to mediate the social interactions between people. I do believe that. I do believe in democracy as to the extent that they should be able to elect representatives. Good, all well and done. However, I do not believe that the state should have the right to take away life.
Even in war?
Huh?
Even in war?
No, that's not the government taking away life. That's still you. That's still you pulling the trigger.
No, but I'm saying, in war, would your position apply in war or not?
It still would apply.
So there's no war. You don't believe that? So
no, I do believe in war.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that even in a war, it's not a government killing a person. It's still
No, but they're making the decision, isn't it?
Well, who makes the decision is irrelevant. At the end of the day, the person pulling the trigger makes the decision. The chain of command,
as long as it's the state that decides.
It's the state.
It is the state. Look, is this
provides the weapon?
Right, is the state that provides the weapon.
So that's a state decision.
But if people don't fire a gun, there is no war. Are we clear with that? And I'm saying, look,
but
if you like, I'm not saying the state is not involved. I'm not saying the state doesn't exist and war doesn't exist.
Yeah.
All I'm saying.
So what's your position?
It comes down to the person. The person pulls the trigger.
Okay.
Right.
So what's your position is unclear to me. So do you think that there should be no death penalty, right?
No, I don't think that.
Okay, no problem. I'm saying that position is as viable from a liberal perspective and a human rights perspective as the position that says that there can be a death penalty if it's regulated by the state
Sure,
and it's
but
agreed
why-
upon by the people.
Why are you conflating? Okay, I understand that you said that human rights are an outgrowth of liberalism, but human rights can oppose liberalism.
Here's what I would say. It's
And
not
like
yeah,
human rights
yeah.
are a standalone issue.
Yeah.
Human rights don't have to be attached to any political, religious, or social system. They can be a standalone principle that other systems can be tested against. It's not
Okay,
like,
but then
you know,
no. But here's the problem.
Right, please.
They will only be understood through a liberal paradigm. We only understand.
exactly.
No. Okay. Here's my challenge to you then. Can you explain to me or show me of, especially in the Western vernacular, can you and in the academic world,
Right, okay.
where human rights have been as a term has been expressed in a non-liberal paradigm?
In a non-liberal paradigm, you had forms of human rights in Yugoslavia, which was by no means a liberal.
No, but those. No, at what point are we talking about?
So we're talking about after the Second World War, after basically the formation of Yugoslavia. So Yugoslavia as basically a socialist state, right?
Okay.
They had a barter of. I wouldn't call them human rights. I mean, they were in the end human rights.
Call it human rights.
All right.
Same in
Here's-
Soviet Union.
here's- no.
The right to a job,
Yeah.
the right to a house, the right to
Yeah.
healthcare. That's
Good.
their,
All right.
what they
Let me explain.
defined as-
Okay.
Yeah, so there
let's-
you go. It's not liberal, and
that's-
it is the definition of human rights.
You're saying it's not liberal. I'm saying it is liberal, and I explain why. The reason why it's liberal is because you're conflating economic and political liberalism with a social liberalism. You could justifiably have a political communism, an economic communism, and a social liberalism.
You can, but those
And
are
by the
very
way,
incompatible.
no, they're not incompatible. I don't think they're incompatible at all. You can have a state of affairs where people still use a liberal paradigm in their social interactions and not in their political or economic interactions, which was the
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine.
which was the case, by the way. And I'm going to be controversial here. Say what you want, but in Hitler's Germany,
What do you mean exactly?
if you look at the pictures in Germany, you tell me what kind of system applied there. Yeah, you had a fascistic system, but the fascistic nationalistic system, but that was an extreme kind of neoconservative type liberalism, authoritarian liberalism, which depended on a heavy social contract theory. What I'm saying is,
Oh man, like if you take a piece of rock and heat it up, you get lava, man. Like that's you already lost the identity of what you wanted to define. So I mean,
no, I'm not. Because what I'm saying is, how do you define social liberalism? We define it through the works of, for example, John Stuart Mill, due to the harm principle.
Yeah,
You can do
sure.
whatever you want so long as someone doesn't harm you. Now, what I'm saying is that did they not have those laws, kind of, in their own way in the Soviet Union? They did. They did. But it
Not
wasn't
good, not fully.
not in a political and economic
No.
way.
Not fully.
It was a
Right, well, not fully anywhere, my friend. Look, they're not fully in America, as you know, right?
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. They still look. The conceptions.
such a perversion of those principles that I don't even know if
you
you
have
could
to
say
appreciate.
they
Look,
apply.
before
I would
19
argue that-
let me make this extremely clear for you. But after 1948, 1948. That's when the United Nations had the
Universal
Declaration of Human Rights. After World War II, which ended in 1945, right? Universal. The Soviet Union did they say we don't agree with that?
No, but they actually were tricky about their definition
No.
of that.
They were tricky about, look, the Soviet Union was tricky about the New World Order that America wanted to make through the IMF and the WHO and all these things.
After the Gold
But the thing is, there's nothing real, but look, the point is this, is that those Declaration of Human Rights, which sprung about because of a social liberalism, was accepted by many of the communist states.
Sure.
So you can have human rights, social human rights, in a communist state.
But it was perverted. They fiddled it.
It's perverted everywhere. It's perverted in America right now, as we know, right? Maybe to less great
It's a
extent.
great example of why you can have that as a standalone basis to measure the extent of the application of
here's
human rights
what I'm saying.
everywhere.
Here's what I'm saying. When they were developed from an American paradigm, when they made the document, the UN Declaration of Human Rights, how did they do it? Who was the ones making the decisions? It was Americans making the majority of the decisions.
No, it was Russia as well.
Yeah, of course they were there, but the majority of decision making in the UN is by America, especially after World War II, right?
Sure, but I think the nationality of those making the law
they were
is
influenced.
besides the point
No,
of its actual validity.
No, it's not, because let me explain why. When they were making the UN Declaration, they based many of their precepts on the Constitution of America and the Declaration of Human Rights.
Sure.
So when they did that, remember we said that goes back, those documents go back to social liberalism.
Sure.
Therefore, there's a trickle down all the way from social liberalism of, obviously Mill came after, right? But the social liberalism, which is also espoused by John Locke, Montesquieu and those guys, went through to the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence, and then made its way into the UN Declaration of Human Rights.
Sure.
Those were not opposed in a wholehearted sense by the Soviets or the communists. Therefore, when we talk about human rights, therefore, it's impossible to conceive of them outside of a liberal paradigm.
So you're saying that it's been imposed upon the world? You're saying it's been imposed
Yeah,
upon
yeah.
the world?
What I'm saying is when we talk about human rights, it's almost impossible to talk
Western
about.
values have been imposed upon the world.
What I'm saying is when we talk about human rights, especially those conceived of after 1948, it's almost impossible to conceive of them outside of a paradigm, a liberal paradigm. Therefore, if we find a contradiction between what is known to us as human rights in an ideal sense, which we say doesn't exist in the real world, and also in the sense of social contract or what a state actually allows, then the question is, who's the arbitrator? The answer is really the arbitrator is the sovereign. The parliament will be the arbitrator.
That's not necessary.
Well, that is, you're saying it's not logically necessary.
Look, man.
Yeah, I agree.
Let me tell. Yes.
I agree with that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, you don't need. Like, if you have a set of human rights as a principle, just as a principle, as a measuring stick, as whatever you want to call it, and you take that as a minimum sort of rights should be allowed to its citizens, wherever, whenever. You don't need the world police to measure yourself against those standards. Whether a country decides to be the world police and enforce those is an entirely different matter, right? But you don't need a sovereign to basically orient yourself towards a certain set of principles. In the same way that as a person, you don't need a sort of someone waving a stick over your head to abide to a certain set of principles. In the
Well, one of the human rights is that a state should be sovereign.
Sure.
So, okay, my question is this. What should be prioritized? The human right number, 17, which says that the state should be sovereign, or human right number 1 or 2, which says that human beings should be free?
I would say number 1 and 2, because you do not have the prerequisites for any of the ones built out of
No, but you would say that, by the way, you would say that in some cases and not others. Like, for example, in a case where there's murder going on and so on, you would say the sovereignty of the state should take the day and that person should go to jail or something, right? Someone commits murder.
No, listen.
But that's exactly what's happened. There's a whole load of Islamic countries, Islamic Muslim countries that have never signed up to the Declaration of Human Rights. They have their own version, which is very similar.
I think Saudi and another country, Iran wasn't
about
it?
15. There's a load of them.
No, I don't know if it's 15.
There
but it was a few of them, but now they all signed
they're
up.
doing exactly what you say.
But,
They've sort of said, look, this doesn't fit our paradigm, is
Yeah,
that the right word? It doesn't fit our model, and we don't accept it. And that's sort of been accepted by the UN grudgingly. They're not happy with it. But
Yeah, I agree with that. So,
I wouldn't say accepted, I just say recognize.
Can you see the point?
I'm sorry.
You want us to look, when you think about it deeply, what I'm saying is as simple as this, and I think you will agree with me. I think you really will agree with me. When sort of absolutely, unrestrictedly, if all human rights had to exist at the same time, all 30 of them, in the world, they would definitely contradict each other.
it wouldn't work. China wouldn't agree.
No, you agreed previously. Let me explain why. Because do you know when you agreed? When I said to you, if there was a contradiction between the state sovereign and...
let me explain.
I said, this was the question I asked you and you took the premise on board. I said, if there was a contradiction between the state sovereign and the and freedom of speech or expression, which one should take priority? You said the freedom of expression or speech, right? No problem. That's a fine arbitration. That's a fine mitigation. That is a fine answer. However, what you've accepted is that there's a possibility for contradiction there.
There's always a possibility for contradiction in any system that allows for freedom of choice.
There you have it. So that's basically my
Each
argument.
country does what it wants to do, basically.
No, but listen, just because there is a possibility for contradiction, that doesn't mean that this contradiction arises as a logical contradiction. This just arises due to...
Yeah, so what I'm saying, even if you wanted to look at it just from a human rights perspective, what I'm saying is this, is that the human rights that we're looking at here, there has to be arbitration. If you want to arbitrate it through the sovereign or through democracy or through whatever you want, there has to be arbitration. Now, really and truly, this is my understanding after a long time of looking into the matter. Your opinion is as valid as someone who says, look, the sovereign should take control in these situations where there's a national security or breach of the
What do you
peace.
mean by sovereign? Like a king or something?
The state.
The sovereign authority.